Following in the footsteps of Hotline Miami, Bloodroots takes on the formula of destroying everything in your path to proceed. The catch is that everything including yourself only takes a single hit to die. This is Bloodroots, a western graphic take on the arcade combo gameplay made popular by Hotline Miami. Complete with cinematic attacks, an interesting art style, and challenging gameplay, it's one new indie game you're going to want to keep your eye on. Bloodroots is the western revenge tale of Mr. Wolf, a lumberjack-looking warrior who finds his town devastated. While investigating the destruction, he comes across the blood beasts who get the jump on Mr. Wolf and leave him for dead. As it turns out, a gunshot isn't enough to take you out though, and you awake with the urge for vengeance and justice. Traveling across the mountaintops and forests, you track down the members of the blood beast and slowly unravel the attack put on you in the first place. While the plot isn't so unique or original, it's a good foundation for the gameplay at hand. Character speech bubbles explain the relationship between characters, including detailing some of the quirks of the blood beast. One, for example, is simply just trying to throw a party that Mr. Wolf is crashing. Some of the writing made me chuckle, though it also came off as cheesy, like a late-night Adult Swim cartoon. If stylish bloody executions are what you're into, then Bloodroots is your action game. You play as Mr. Wolf, who travels throughout the mountainside in search of his attackers. Each one of them is broken up into an act that further breaks down into smaller chapters. Consider each chapter as a level that has you run through an isometric view of the environment as you take on enemies. These enemies come in all sorts of shapes and sizes with different attack patterns. The one common thing about them, including yourself, is that it takes a single hit to die. This creates a very fun arcade gameplay formula with a heavy emphasis on comboing your attacks. Like any other game in the genre, you're encouraged to chain your kills together for a combo. The higher your combo, the better the score you receive, tallying up to your final score for each chapter. You really only have one attack, and that's swinging the weapon in your hand. Luckily for you, you can grab just about most handheld objects around you. A carrot, a ladder, a spear, and so on. They all have different amounts of hits before they break and attack differently. For example, a spear lunges you forward into the air while a ladder launches you upward vertically. These introduce interesting approaches to not only attacks but also platforming. Gameplay may be top-down, but there are different levels of verticality with the enemies at different heights and patterns. That's where those varying weapons and attacks come into play, really adding a layer of strategy to the mix. That's yet to mention the enemies start to put up a fight pretty early on into the campaign. Each chapter quickly becomes a chess game of finding the best route through a level with a combination of weapons to execute the ideal combo in the shortest amount of time. What on paper felt like an easy spam of the attack button to win quickly hit reality and became a sequence of me dying multiple times before finally landing on a route that worked, earning me a grade that's worth showing during this review. Speaking of grades, there's an online leaderboard connected to every level. It's a great incentive to replay levels for better scores and compete with your friends. After every level, you're brought back to your campfire site, and you can think of this as your hub area. Here you can equip hats that you've collected from fallen enemies to modify your stats. The boar hat, for example, adds a dash to your melee attack, making it a much more useful tool. It's also here where you can go back and replay previous levels if you're so ever inclined to better your score. At the end of every act is a boss fight that feel like the cherry on top of each act. These play completely differently from every other level, taking out the beat everything aspect of the game and pushing you to survive a wave of dangerous enemies and platforming. It's a fun twist on the campaign's main formula, and a challenging one at that. Bloodroots' cartoony art style completely contradicts the gory bloody combat on display, and yet it somehow works. It reminds me so much of the recent revival of Samurai Jack, but now in 3D presented with an isometric point of view. It admittedly took some getting used to for me to like it, but after a few minutes I started to fall for its charm. The gameplay does this one specific cinematic camera transition that happens during every final kill. Depending on the weapon you have, you'll get a different animation. It looks amazing when the camera is pointing the right way, though I've sadly come across a few occasions where the camera is blocked by something in the way. Playing on the Nintendo Switch, the performance was stable for the most part, targeting 30 FPS. There are a few moments where the frame rate gets dipped down to the low 20 frames per second when heavy alpha effects are on display. Loading times are also significantly longer on the Switch as compared to other devices. For other consoles and PC, the gameplay is kept at a 60 frames per second mark with improved loading times. I will say the gameplay does feel tailor-made for the handheld, though you might be better off playing this on another platform simply for the performance. There's an interesting range of genres with Bloodroots. While it is heavily Western inspired, the music ranges from something that belongs in the Wild West to drum and bass of a club. While none of the music really resonated with me, I didn't think the tracks were bad either. Ultimately, I was more distracted or rather focused on the gameplay, drowning out the alright music. Aside from the music, some voice acting would have been nice to go along with the dialogue. There isn't a ton of dialogue throughout the campaign, but when there is, usually the character speaking lets out some sort of grunt of some kind. At least the different types of enemies make different grunt sounds when attacked, so there's some sort of variety between them. Bloodroots is a fun new addition to the action combat arcade gameplay made popular by Hotline Miami. It wears its inspiration on its sleeve and innovates on it with challenging gameplay and weapons that evolve levels not only in terms of combat but also platforming. Presented in a lovely art style that combines graphic visuals with a mix of 3D and 2D animations, Bloodroots catches the eye easily but hooks you with its compelling gameplay, leaving you wanting more.